I was folding laundry in what used to be my own living room when my son Marcus walked in and dropped a stack of bills on the coffee table with a loud thud. His voice was cold, matter of fact. "Mom, we need to talk about your pension. Either you sign it over to help this family, or we'll have to look into assisted living facilities. Your choice." I stood there, holding one of his wife's designer blouses that I'd been hand-washing for months, and something inside me finally snapped. Not in anger, in clarity. For the first time in 3 years, I saw exactly what my life had become. And I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I finally understood what I had to do. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years ago, I thought I was helping my family through a rough patch. Marcus had just lost his job at the marketing firm, and his wife Jessica was struggling with her new catering business. They had 2 kids, Emma, who was 7, and little Tyler, barely 4, and they were drowning in debt. When Marcus called me that October evening, his voice breaking as he explained they might lose the house, I didn't hesitate. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but could you move in with us for a while? We could really use help with the kids, and honestly, we can't afford daycare anymore. Plus, your place is so big and empty since Dad passed. Maybe it would be good for all of us." I had been rattling around in the 4-bedroom house that George and I had shared for 38 years. The silence had become deafening after his heart attack 2 years earlier. The thought of being useful again, of hearing children's laughter fill a home, seemed like a blessing. I sold my house within 6 weeks and moved into their guest bedroom, bringing my life savings and my monthly pension of $2,800. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't moving in as family. I was moving in as unpaid staff. The first sign should have been when Jessica handed me a laminated schedule on my second day. There. It was color-coded and detailed down to 15-minute intervals. "Just so we're all on the same page about routines," she said with that bright smile she used when she wanted something. "The kids do so much better with structure. The schedule had me waking up at 5:30 a.m. to start breakfast, getting the kids ready for school, doing household cleaning while they were gone, picking them up at 3:15, supervising homework, starting dinner by 5, handling bath time, and putting them to bed by 8. My free time was listed as 8:30 to 10 p.m., after which I was expected to prepare anything needed for the next day. Followed it without complaint. After all, they were struggling and I wanted to help. Marcus was spending 12 hours a day job hunting and doing freelance graphic design work that barely paid anything. Jessica's catering business was just getting off the ground, and she was working nights and weekends trying to build a client base. The kids needed stability, and I could provide that. But somehow, months turned into a year, and the temporary arrangement became permanent. Marcus finally found a new job, a good one actually, making more than he'd ever made before. Jessica's business started taking off, booking corporate events and wedding receptions. Yet nothing changed about my role in the house. If anything, my responsibilities expanded. Jessica started booking more events, which meant longer hours away from home. "Mom, you're so much better with the kids than any babysitter we could hire," Marcus would say. "And they love you so much. We'd feel terrible leaving them with strangers." So I stayed home every Friday and Saturday night while they worked or went out with clients. Date nights became my responsibility to arrange childcare for, except I was the childcare. The house. Rules multiplied like weeds. Emma needed her backpack packed a specific way, with her folder in the front pocket and her water bottle on the left side. Tyler would only eat his sandwiches cut diagonally, and his apple slices had to be arranged in a perfect circle. Laundry had to be sorted into 6 different categories, and Jessica's delicate work clothes required hand washing and air drying. The kids' rooms needed to be tidied twice a day, once after school and once before bed. Marcus developed particular preferences. 2. His coffee had to be ready by 6:45 a.m., made with exactly 2 scoops of the expensive organic blend Jessica bought, with a splash of oat milk heated to the perfect temperature. His work shirts needed to be pressed every morning, and his lunch, packed in the insulated bag with the ice pack positioned just so. On Sundays, he expected a full breakfast. Eggs over easy, turkey bacon, wheat toast cut into triangles, fresh fruit arranged attractively on the plate. I told myself this was what families did for each other. This was love in action. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being Margaret, the woman who'd run her own successful accounting practice for 25 years, who'd raised Marcus mostly on her own after his father left when he was 12, who'd put herself through night school while working full-time and managing a household. I became mom, not the honored title I'd once worn with pride, but a job description that encompassed maid, cook, nanny, secretary, and emotional support system, all rolled into one exhausted woman who was invisible unless something needed to be done. The breaking point started with Emma's school project. She needed to present on her family tree, and she'd drawn a beautiful poster with pictures and decorations. In the center was their house, with Jessica and Marcus standing proudly in front. Emma and Tyler were on either side, smiling in their school pictures. And there, in the corner, almost as an afterthought, was a tiny stick figure labeled, "Grandma Margaret, she helps us." That's what I'd become. The help. I was putting Emma to bed that night when she looked up at me with those serious dark eyes she'd inherited from Marcus. "Grandma Margaret, why don't you have your own house like other grandmas?" The question hit me harder than it should have. "Well, sweetie, I live here with you now. Isn't that nice?" She nodded, but then asked, "But where do you go when you want to be alone?" "Mommy and Daddy have their room, and Tyler and I have our rooms. But you just have the guest room where people sleep when they visit." I tucked her in and kissed her forehead, but her words echoed in my mind long after I'd turned off her light. When was the last time I'd had privacy? Real privacy. Not just 20 minutes in the bathroom or the brief moments after everyone else went to bed when I was too exhausted to do anything but collapse. My guest room was exactly that. A place where I existed between tasks, surrounded by furniture that wasn't mine. Wearing clothes that I stored in a single closet that I shared with Jessica's out-of-season wardrobe and Marcus's old college. Textbooks that he refused to throw away. I had a twin bed, a small dresser, and a corner where I kept my few personal belongings. It felt more like living in a college dormitory than having a home. The financial arrangement had shifted too, gradually, and without discussion. When I first moved in, I'd offered to pay rent and contribute to groceries. Marcus had refused, saying they wouldn't dream of taking money from me when I was helping them so much. But over time, I found myself paying for more and more things. The expensive organic groceries Jessica preferred, the kids' school supplies and extracurricular fees, the streaming services and premium cable package, the lawn service that Marcus said they couldn't afford to cancel. My pension payments went into their joint account for simplicity, Marcus had explained. This way we can manage all the household expenses together, and you don't have to worry about writing separate checks for everything. What he didn't mention was that I'd never see a detailed breakdown of where my money went, or that I'd need to ask permission to spend my own pension on personal items. When I wanted to buy a new winter coat last year, my old one had finally given up after 15 years, I'd had to justify the expense to Jessica, who questioned whether the $89 coat I'd picked out was really necessary when my old one still had some life in it. I ended up buying a $35 coat from the discount rack that was too thin for Michigan winters, but I told myself it was fine. The money I saved could go toward Tyler's soccer registration. That's how it worked in this house. My needs were always negotiable, always secondary to everyone else's wants. I was supposed to be grateful for the privilege of serving, honored to sacrifice my comfort for their convenience. The worst part wasn't the work or even the financial control. It was the way I'd disappeared as a person. Conversations stopped. When I entered the room, not because I wasn't welcome, but because I wasn't really seen as someone who might have opinions or experiences worth sharing. I was like a household appliance, appreciated when functioning properly, noticed only when something went wrong. Marcus and Jessica would discuss their social plans, their work challenges, their dreams for the future, and I might as well have been wallpaper. If they mentioned me at all, it was in the third person. Mom can watch the kids that night, or Mom doesn't mind doing the grocery shopping. Never, would you like to join us? Or, what do you think, Mom? Or, how was your day? I'd become a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of other people's happiness. But that morning, when Marcus dropped those bills on the coffee table and gave me his ultimatum about my pension, something fundamental shifted inside me. As I stood there holding Jessica's blouse, the one she'd worn to that networking event where she'd complained about having to hire expensive sitters when she had perfectly good help at home, I realized I had a choice to make. I could keep disappearing, keep shrinking, keep pretending that this arrangement was love instead of exploitation. Or I could remember who I used to be before I became everyone else's solution to their problems. The old Margaret, the one who'd built a successful business from nothing, who'd raised a son as a single mother while working full-time, who'd nursed her husband through his final illness with grace and strength. That woman was still in there somewhere. She'd just been buried under 3 years of other people's expectations and my own misguided devotion. Marcus was still talking, explaining why my pension needed to go toward their mortgage payments and the kids' college funds, why it made more sense for me to contribute to the family's long-term stability, rather than hoarding money I didn't really need. His voice had that patient, condescending tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable about something unreasonable. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd learned that his mother's love came without boundaries, without conditions, and without cost to himself. I'd taught him that lesson through 3 years of saying yes to everything, of prioritizing his family's comfort over my own dignity, of accepting less and less until I'd nearly accepted nothing at all. But I was done being a lesson in self-sacrifice. I was done being grateful for the privilege of my own exploitation. I set down Jessica's blouse, smoothed my hands on my jeans, and gave Marcus that smile, the one that would puzzle him for years to come. Because in that moment, I wasn't his live-in help anymore. I wasn't his problem to solve or his resource to manage. I was Margaret Elizabeth Williams, and I was about to remember what that meant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The catalyst for my awakening didn't come as a dramatic explosion. It came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, during what should have been an ordinary trip to Tyler's pediatrician appointment. Tyler had been complaining of stomach aches for weeks, and Jessica was convinced it was just him trying to get out of preschool. "He's manipulative like that," she'd said dismissively. "Just ignore it and he'll stop." But I'd noticed Tyler wasn't eating his favorite foods, wasn't playing with his usual energy, and had started having accidents at night after being potty trained. For over a year. When I suggested maybe we should have him checked out, Marcus rolled his eyes. "Mom, Jessica knows her own kid. You're being a little dramatic." But that Tuesday morning, Tyler threw up his breakfast and had a fever of 101.3. Even Jessica couldn't dismiss that. "Fine," she said, grabbing her keys. "I'll take him in, but I've got that corporate lunch set up at noon. This better be quick." I watched Tyler's pale little face and made a decision. "Why don't I take him? You focus on your event. I know Dr. Peterson, and Tyler's comfortable with me." Jessica looked relieved. "Actually, that would be perfect. Just make sure you ask about his eating habits. I think he's being picky to get attention." The appointment revealed that Tyler had a significant case of strep throat that had gone untreated for weeks, plus signs of severe dehydration. Dr. Peterson, a kind woman in her 50s who'd been Tyler's doctor since birth, looked concerned as she examined him. Mrs. Williams, has Tyler been complaining of throat pain? This level of infection doesn't develop overnight. I explained about the stomach aches, the loss of appetite, the behavioral changes. Dr. Peterson nodded grimly. Classic strep symptoms in young children. They often can't articulate throat pain, so it manifests as stomach discomfort and general malaise. He'll need antibiotics immediately, and I want to see him back in 3 days to monitor his progress. As she wrote the prescription, she added, I have to ask, why wasn't he brought in sooner? This could have been treated much more easily a week ago. The shame hit me like a physical blow. I was with Tyler every day. I fed him his meals, tucked him in at night, comforted him when he cried. I'd seen all the signs, felt his forehead when he seemed warm, noticed his lack of energy. But I'd deferred to Jessica's judgment because she was his mother, and I was just the help. I'd let a 4-year-old suffer because I'd been trained to doubt my own instincts, to prioritize harmony over advocacy, to stay in my lane even when my lane was taking care of the children I loved. Dr. Peterson must have seen something in my expression because her voice softened. These things happen, Mrs. Williams. The important thing is, he's getting treatment now. You did the right thing bringing him in today, but as I drove Tyler to the pharmacy to fill his prescription, listening to his labored breathing in the back seat, I knew I hadn't done the right thing. I'd done too little, too late, because I'd been more concerned about overstepping boundaries than protecting a sick child. Tyler fell asleep in his car seat while I waited for the prescription, his little hand clutching the stuffed elephant I'd bought him for his 3rd birthday. Looking at his flushed face in the rearview mirror, I felt something crack open inside my chest. This was my grandson, the little boy who ran to me when he scraped his knee, who saved me the last bite of his cookie, who told me I was his favorite, grown up after Mommy and Daddy, and I'd failed him by being too polite to trust my own grandmother's instincts. When we got home, Tyler was groggy from the fever reducer Dr. Peterson had given him. I settled him on the couch with his elephant and some cartoons, then called Jessica to update her on the diagnosis. Strep throat? Her voice was sharp with annoyance. Seriously? All this drama for strep throat? They have antibiotics for that. He'll be fine in 2 days. Jessica, Dr. Peterson said it was pretty severe. He's been sick for weeks. Well, kids get sick. That's what they do. Did you get the prescription? I explained the medication schedule, the follow-up appointment, the need to monitor his fever closely. Jessica listened with obvious impatience. Look, I'm in the middle of setting up for 60 people. Can you handle all that? I'll be home late tonight, and Marcus has that client dinner. Just give him the medicine and make sure he drinks fluids. It's not rocket science. After she hung up, I sat next to Tyler on the couch, gently stroking his hair as he dozed. Emma would be home from school in an hour, full of energy and questions and needs. Marcus would expect dinner ready when he got home at 6, despite the fact that I'd spent the day at medical appointments. Jessica would breeze in around 9, tired from her event, expecting Tyler to be bathed and settled and everything to be running smoothly. None of them would ask how the appointment went beyond confirming that Tyler would be fine. None of them would thank me for spending 3 hours in waiting rooms and pharmacies. None of them would acknowledge that I'd advocated for Tyler when his own parents had dismissed his symptoms. I was the family safety net, catching everything that fell through the cracks of their busy, important lives. But safety nets are only noticed when they're not there. That evening, as I was giving Tyler his 2nd dose of antibiotics, Marcus came home in a particularly good mood. He'd closed a big deal at work, and his client dinner had gone well. He kissed Tyler's forehead and ruffled his hair. Feeling better, buddy? Grandma took good care of you today, huh? Tyler nodded sleepily. Grandma knew I was really sick. She told the doctor about my tummy hurting. Marcus looked at me with mild surprise. Oh, right. Jessica said it was strep. Thanks for handling that, Mom. Saved us a lot of hassle. Hassle. Taking care of his sick child was a hassle that I'd conveniently handled for him. Later that night, after the kids were in bed and the kitchen was cleaned, I found myself standing in the backyard, looking up at stars I could barely see through, the suburban light pollution. In my old house, I'd had a clear view of the night sky from my bedroom window. George and I used to sit on the back porch on summer evenings, identifying constellations and talking about our days. Now, my days were measured in other people's needs and schedules. When was the last time I'd had a conversation about my thoughts, my interests, my dreams? When had I stopped being a person with opinions and become just a resource to be managed? My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor back in my old neighborhood. Diane. She and I had been friends for 15 years, but we'd barely spoken since I moved in with Marcus. Saw your old house is up for rent again. Third tenant in 2 years. Remember how we used to joke that you'd never leave that place? Hope you're happy with your new adventure. Miss our coffee talks. I stared at the message, remembering those coffee talks. Diane and I would sit on her back deck every Saturday morning, discussing books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, grandchildren we adored but didn't live with. I'd been Margaret then, not just Mom. I'd had opinions about politics and movies and the best way to grow tomatoes. I'd had a life that belonged to me. I started to type a response, but what could I say? That my adventure consisted of being an unpaid domestic worker in my son's house? That I couldn't remember the last book I'd read or movie I'd chosen to watch? That I'd traded my independence for the illusion of being needed? Instead, I just typed, "Miss you too. Hope you're well." But as I hit send, I realized I missed more than Diane's friendship. I missed myself. The next morning brought a new low point. Jessica had left early for a breakfast meeting, and Marcus was rushing to get ready for work. Tyler was feeling better, but still needed to stay home from preschool, and Emma had forgotten about a science project that was due that day. "Mom, can you help Emma with her volcano thing?" Marcus called from upstairs. "And make sure Tyler takes his medicine at 10 and 2. Oh, and we're out of milk and bread, so if you could grab some groceries while Tyler naps, that would be great. I'll pay you back later. Pay me back later." As if I were an employee who'd advanced money for office supplies. Emma was in tears about her project, insisting she needed poster board and colored markers and modeling clay that we didn't have. Tyler was whining about taking his medicine. The dishwasher was full but needed to be unloaded. The laundry was backed up because Tyler had been sick in his sheets twice during the night. And Marcus breezed out the door with his travel mug of perfectly prepared coffee, calling over his shoulder, "You're the best, Mom. Don't know what we'd do without you." As the front door closed behind him, I stood in the kitchen surrounded by breakfast dishes and a crying 7-year-old, holding a sick 4-year-old who was demanding cartoons. And I finally understood what Diane had meant about adventures. This wasn't an adventure. This was a trap I'd walked into willingly, one small compromise at a time. Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma Margaret, are you going to help me or not? I'm going to get in trouble if my project isn't done." I looked down at her anxious face, so much like Marcus's when he was her age and worried about disappointing his teachers. The old me would have dropped everything, rushed to the store for supplies, spent the morning crafting a volcano that would earn Emma an A and praise from her teacher. But Tyler was sick and needed my attention. The household was falling apart around me, and Emma's project was her responsibility, or rather, her parents' responsibility to help her manage. For the first time in 3 years, I said no. "Emma, sweetie, I need to take care of Tyler today because he's sick. Your project is important, but your parents will need to help you figure it out when they get home." Her face crumpled. "But they're never home. And Mom said you would help me because that's what you do." That's what you do. Not because I wanted to, not because it was my job as her grandmother, but because it's what I did. I was the person who fixed problems, who said yes, who made everyone else's life easier at the expense of my own sanity. I knelt down to Emma's level and took her hands gently. "I love you very much, and I love helping you. But today, I need to focus on Tyler. Sometimes, grown-ups have to make hard choices about where to spend their time and energy. She stomped off to her room, and Tyler started crying because Emma was upset, and the medicine schedule was forgotten while I tried to manage the emotional chaos I'd created by setting one small boundary. But for the first time in years, I didn't rush to fix everyone's feelings. I didn't apologize for prioritizing appropriately. I didn't take responsibility for problems that weren't mine to solve. It was a tiny act of rebellion, but it felt like cracking open a door that had been sealed, shut for too long. And through that crack, I caught a glimpse of who I used to be, and who I could be again. The weekend after Tyler's strep throat diagnosis brought an unexpected visitor that would shatter whatever illusions I still held about my place in this family. My sister Carol drove up from Ohio for what she thought would be a pleasant surprise visit. She hadn't seen me since Christmas, and I hadn't realized how much I'd changed until I saw myself reflected in her shocked expression. Carol arrived Saturday morning while Marcus and Jessica were both sleeping in, their weekly ritual that I'd learned to accommodate by keeping the children quiet until at least 9 a.m. I was in the kitchen making pancakes for Emma and Tyler when the doorbell rang. "Margaret?" Carol's voice carried confusion even through the front door. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming to visit Marcus?" I opened the door to find my younger sister holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing the same puzzled expression she'd had as a child when she couldn't solve a math problem. Carol was 2 years younger than me but looked a decade younger than my current exhausted state. Her silver hair was styled in a chic bob, she wore well-fitted jeans and a cashmere sweater, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like what I used to look like a woman who had time to take care of herself. "I'm not visiting," I said quietly, conscious of the sleeping family upstairs. "I live here now." Carol's eyes swept past me to take in the scene. Me in my old robe and slippers at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. Flour in my hair from pancake making. The sounds of cartoons blaring from the living room where the kids were eating breakfast off TV trays. Because the dining room table was covered with Jessica's work papers. "You live here?" Carol stepped inside, still holding the flowers like she wasn't sure what to do with them. "Since when? What happened to your house?" Before I could answer, Tyler came running into the foyer, still in his pajamas with syrup on his face. "Grandma Margaret, I need more juice." "In a minute, sweetheart," I said, then turned back to Carol. "I sold the house 3 years ago. I moved in to help with the kids." Carol's expression shifted from confusion to concern. She'd known my house, had visited me there countless times. She knew how much that place meant to me, how George and I had renovated every room together, how I'd tended that garden for decades. Emma appeared next, dragging her stuffed unicorn and demanding to know why there was a stranger in our house. I introduced Carol as my sister, their great-aunt, but Emma just stared at her suspiciously before declaring she was still hungry. "I need to finish getting the kids breakfast," I told Carol apologetically. "Marcus and Jessica are still sleeping," I. 8 a.m. on Saturday? Carol followed me into the kitchen, taking in the breakfast dishes piled in the sink, the coffee maker that was clearly set to brew automatically, the medication schedule taped to the refrigerator. "Margaret, what is this setup?" I tried to explain while flipping pancakes and refilling juice cups and wiping Tyler's face and reminding Emma to eat her fruit too. But Carol wasn't really listening to my words. She was watching my actions, seeing how I moved through the house like a short-order cook and camp counselor combined. "Where do you sleep?" she asked suddenly. I nodded toward the hallway. "The guest room. It's very comfortable." Carol walked down the hall without invitation and pushed open the door to my room. I heard her sharp intake of breath. When I joined her, a moment later, leaving the kids with their cartoons, I saw my living space through her eyes. The twin bed with its generic comforter. The small dresser crammed with my belongings. The corner where I kept my personal items. A few photos. Some books. My jewelry box that George had given me. It looked like a college dorm room. Temporary and impersonal. Margaret Elizabeth Williams, Carol said, using my full name like our mother used to when she was serious. What have you done to yourself? I'm helping my family, I said defensively. Marcus and Jessica needed support, and the kids what? Have two parents who are apparently too lazy to get up before 8 a.m. on a Saturday to feed their own children? Carol, you don't understand. Jessica works very hard with her catering business, and Marcus has a demanding job. And you don't work hard? You don't deserve to sleep in on Saturday morning? You don't deserve your own space in your own home? Carol's voice was rising, and I shushed her, worried about waking Marcus and Jessica. That's when it hit her. You're worried about waking them up? Margaret, you're tiptoeing around in your own life. Just then, we heard footsteps on the stairs and Jessica's voice calling out irritatedly, "What's all the noise down there? Some of us are trying to sleep." Jessica appeared in the doorway of my room wearing silk pajamas that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, her hair perfectly tousled in that way that takes effort to achieve. She looked at Carol with the same suspicious expression Emma had used. "Oh, I didn't know we were having company." Jessica's tone suggested that having unannounced visitors was somewhere between inconsiderate and criminal. "This is my sister Carol," I said quickly. "She drove up from Cincinnati for a surprise visit." "Well, next time, maybe call first. We like to keep weekends quiet for family time." Jessica's smile was sharp as glass. "I assume you'll be leaving?" "After lunch. We have plans this afternoon." Carol stared at Jessica like she was looking at an interesting specimen under a microscope. "Actually, I was hoping to spend the weekend catching up with my sister. Maybe take her out to dinner, do some shopping." "Oh, that won't work," Jessica said dismissively. "Margaret has the kids tonight. Marcus and I have theater tickets and we can't really cancel at this point. Maybe another time." She swept back upstairs without another word, leaving Carol and me standing in the hallway. Carol turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, blazing fury. "Did that woman just tell me when I could and couldn't spend time with my own sister?" "Carol, please keep your voice down. It's not what you think. What I think is that you've become a servant in this house, and you've forgotten you have any other choice." The rest of Saturday was a masterclass in humiliation. Carol watched as I served Marcus and Jessica breakfast in bed, cleaned up after the kids, did 3 loads of laundry, grocery shopped, prepared lunch, and then started dinner preparations, all while they lounged around reading newspapers and scrolling through their phones. When Marcus finally emerged from the bedroom around 11 a.m., he greeted Carol pleasantly enough, but immediately started asking me about weekend logistics. "Mom, did you pick up my dry cleaning yesterday? And remember, we need the kids bathed and in bed by 7 tonight since we're leaving at 7:30. "Your mother isn't your personal assistant," Carol said quietly, but Marcus either didn't hear her or chose to ignore the comment. Jessica joined us for lunch, during which she dominated the conversation with stories about her latest catering successes and complaints about difficult clients. When Carol tried to ask me about my life, Jessica would interrupt with requests for more coffee or questions about whether I'd remembered to call the school about Emma's field trip. "So, Margaret," Carol said during a brief lull, "do you miss your garden? Remember how proud you were of those roses?" Before I could answer, Jessica laughed. "Oh, Margaret's much too busy for gardening now. Between the kids and keeping house, who has time for hobbies?" "Hobbies?" Carol's voice was dangerously quiet. "Gardening was Margaret's passion for 30 years. Well, priorities change when you have grandchildren to think about," Jessica said with that bright, dismissive smile. "Right, Margaret." I nodded because it was easier than explaining that I'd never chosen to give up gardening. It had simply been squeezed out of existence by everyone else's needs. After lunch, Marcus and Jessica disappeared to get ready for their theater date, leaving me with the kids and Carol. We walked to the nearby park, where Carol finally had a chance to speak freely. "Margaret, I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said as we pushed Tyler on the swings. "This is not normal. This is not healthy. and this is not love. You don't understand their situation. I understand that you sold your house and moved in to help temporarily, and somehow that became permanent unpaid employment. Carol caught Tyler as he jumped off the swing. I understand that you're being taken advantage of by people who should be protecting and honoring you. They're not taking advantage. They need me. They need a nanny and a housekeeper. They don't need you. They need your services. Carol sat down on the bench beside me. When was the last time Marcus asked how you're feeling? When did Jessica last thank you for anything? When did either of them show any interest in your thoughts, your dreams, your well-being? I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. That evening, as I bathed the kids and got them ready for bed while Marcus and Jessica prepared for their night out, Carol helped me tuck Emma and Tyler in. Emma had warmed up to her great aunt and was chattering about school and friends and her upcoming birthday party. "Are you coming to my party, Aunt Carol?" Emma asked. "When is it, sweetheart?" "Next Saturday. Mommy's making a princess cake, and we're having it at the park." "Right, Grandma Margaret?" I felt a familiar sinking in my stomach. "What princess cake, Emma?" "The one Mommy promised. She said she'd make me a castle cake with pink towers and everything." I'd heard nothing about this party or this cake, but I knew exactly what would happen. Jessica would get busy with work, the elaborate cake would become my responsibility, and I'd spend my weekend shopping for supplies and decorating something I'd never been consulted about. Carol was watching my face. "Sounds like a big project," she said carefully. After the kids were asleep, Marcus and Jessica left for their theater date. Carol and I sat in the living room with cups of tea, and she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Margaret, when are you going home?" "I am home." "This isn't your home. This is a place where you work and sleep. Home is where you belong, where you matter, where you have a voice and a vote and basic respect." Carol leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, are you happy?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Was I happy? I'd stopped asking myself that question 3 years ago. Happiness had become irrelevant, a luxury I couldn't afford when so many people needed me. "I'm useful," I said finally. "That's not the same thing, and you know it." We sat in silence for a while, and then Carol asked, "What would happen if you left?" "I can't leave. The kids have 2 parents who are perfectly capable of raising them." "What would happen to you if you left?" I realized I couldn't answer that question either because I'd stopped imagining a life that belonged to me. Carol stayed until Sunday evening, and her presence held up a mirror I hadn't looked into for 3 years. In that reflection, I saw a woman who'd lost herself so gradually she hadn't noticed she was disappearing. A woman who'd confused being needed with being loved, who'd mistaken exhaustion for purpose, who'd traded her identity for the illusion of family harmony. As I hugged her goodbye in the driveway, Carol whispered in my ear, "It's not too late to come back to yourself, Maggie, but you have to want it more than you want their approval." After her taillights disappeared into the evening, I stood alone in the driveway and felt the weight of 3 years pressing down on me. Tomorrow would bring another week of the same routine, the same expectations, the same slow erosion of whatever was left of Margaret Williams. But Carol's words echoed in my mind. It's not too late to come back to yourself. The question was, did I remember who that person used to be? Carol's visit had planted a seed of awareness that I couldn't ignore, but it was Emma's birthday party that finally showed me just how deep I'd fallen into this trap. The elaborate princess castle cake Jessica had promised became my responsibility, as I'd predicted, but what I hadn't anticipated was how that cake would become a symbol of everything wrong with my life. On Monday morning, Jessica cornered me in the kitchen while the kids were getting ready for school. "So, about Emma's party," she began, already pulling out her phone to show me Pinterest images. "I found the perfect castle cake design. It shouldn't be too hard to make." The cake in the photo was an architectural marvel. 4 separate tower cakes arranged around a central castle, complete with fondant decorations, edible glitter, and intricate piping work that would take a professional baker hours to complete. Jessica, this looks incredibly complicated. Maybe we could do something simpler or order a cake from the bakery. Her expression shifted to that patient disappointment she used when I wasn't being sufficiently accommodating. Margaret, this is Emma's 7th birthday. She's been looking forward to this for weeks. Besides, you're so good at baking. Remember that pound cake you made for Marcus's birthday? This is just a little more involved. A little more involved. Like comparing a paper airplane to a Boeing 747. I've never worked with fondant before, and I don't have the right pans for... I already ordered everything online. It'll be here Wednesday. I even found a YouTube tutorial that breaks it down step by step. Jessica's tone suggested the matter was settled. The party's Saturday at 2 p.m. at Riverside Park. I'll handle the decorations and activities, you just focus on the cake. After she left for work, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the photo of that castle cake, and something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. This wasn't about a birthday cake. This was about a pattern that had taken over my entire existence. Other people making decisions about my time, energy, and resources without consulting me, then presenting those decisions as opportunities for me to prove my love. I called the bakery. Sunshine Bakery. This is Rita. Hi, I'd like to order a custom birthday cake for this Saturday, a princess castle design. Oh, we'd love to help, but custom orders require at least 2 weeks' notice. I could do a regular sheet cake with princess decorations, or we have some beautiful pre-made options in our display case. Of course, the elaborate cake Jessica had volunteered me to make was impossible to get professionally done on short notice. She'd created a situation where I had no choice but to spend my week becoming a cake decorator. That evening, when the fondant and specialty pans arrived via overnight shipping, charged to the household account that came out of my pension, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called Carol. I need a favor, I said without preamble when she answered. Name it. Will you come back this weekend? For Emma's birthday party. I want you to see something. There was a pause. Are you okay, Maggie? I'm figuring that out. But I need a witness. Carol agreed to drive up Saturday morning, and I spent the week watching myself go through the motions of creating an impossible cake while something fundamental shifted inside me. I followed the YouTube tutorials, rolled fondant until my hands cramped, piped frosting until my wrist ached, and built a cake that was objectively beautiful and objectively ridiculous. But I also did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I paid attention to every moment of resentment, every flash of anger, every instance of feeling taken for granted. Instead of pushing those feelings down, I let them accumulate like evidence in a case I was building against my own complicity. Friday night, as I put the finishing touches on the castle towers, Jessica breezed through the kitchen and gasped with delight. Oh my God, Margaret, this is incredible! Emma is going to die! You're seriously talented at this! She took photos from every angle, already planning, I was sure, to post them on social media as evidence of what a thoughtful mother she was. The cake that had consumed 30 hours of my week would become a prop in her performance of motherhood. I should warn you, she continued, scrolling through her phone. My mom is coming to the party tomorrow. She's driving down from Grand Rapids. I froze. Jessica's mother, Linda, was a piece of work, a woman who'd made it clear from day one that she thought Jessica had married beneath her station and that Marcus's family was not up to her standards. I'd met her exactly twice, both times enduring her subtle digs about my clothes, my background, and my role in her daughter's household. She's staying the night, so we'll need the guest room ready. Clean sheets, fresh towels, the works. Oh, and she's very particular about breakfast. She likes her eggs over medium and her bacon crispy but not burnt. Think you can handle that? Jessica was asking me to give up my bedroom for her mother and serve as a short-order cook, all delivered with the casual assumption that I'd be delighted to accommodate. Where will I sleep if Linda takes my room? Jessica looked momentarily puzzled, as if the question hadn't occurred to her. Oh, the couch folds out, right? It's just one night. The couch. After creating a masterpiece cake for her daughter's party, I was being relegated to the living room couch so that her mother, who barely tolerated my existence, could have proper accommodations. Saturday morning brought chaos that even I wasn't prepared for. Linda arrived at 9 a.m. with 2 suitcases for an overnight stay, and immediately began critiquing everything from the coffee. Is this decaf? I specifically asked Jessica to tell you I only drink regular. To the temperature in the house. Don't. You people believe in air conditioning? She surveyed the castle cake with the expression of a health inspector finding violations. My goodness, that's certainly elaborate. I hope it tastes better than it looks. Homemade cakes can be so hit or miss. Carol arrived shortly after Linda, and I watched my sister take in the dynamic with the same sharp attention she'd shown during her previous visit. Linda immediately claimed the comfortable chair in the living room and began holding court, regaling us with stories about her other daughter's children and how well they were doing in their various activities. Of course, Emma and Tyler are lucky to have such a dedicated grandmother figure, Linda said, the pause before dedicated loaded with condescension. Not every family has live-in help willing to work for free. Live-in help. That's how Jessica's mother saw me. Not as Marcus's mother or Emma and Tyler's grandmother, but as free domestic labor that came with the family package. Carol's eyebrows shot up, but she remained diplomatically quiet as we loaded the car with party supplies and headed to Riverside Park. The party itself was a surreal experience. Emma was thrilled with her cake, and the other parents oohed and awed appropriately. Jessica graciously accepted compliments on the amazing cake she'd made for her daughter, correcting no one who assumed she'd done the work herself. Jessica is so talented, one mother gushed. I can barely frost a sheet cake, and look at this masterpiece. Well, I had some help, Jessica said with false modesty, glancing at me with a smile that suggested I should be grateful for the acknowledgement. Found myself standing apart from the festivities, watching Marcus and Jessica play the roles of devoted parents while I cleaned up trash and managed the logistics they'd created but weren't handling. Linda held court with the other grandmothers, discussing her bridge club and her recent cruise, while I served cake and wiped faces and fetched juice boxes. Carol appeared beside me as I was repacking the cooler. You know what I'm seeing, don't. You? I followed her gaze to where Marcus was helping Emma open presents while Jessica took photos and Linda dispensed parenting advice to anyone who'd listen. I'm seeing a party where the person who did the most work is the least acknowledged. Carol continued, where you're treated like staff while everyone else gets to be family. It's Emma's day. It's not about me. Maggie, when is it about you? When do you get to be celebrated or thanked or even just seen? Before I could answer, Emma came running over with chocolate frosting on her face and cake crumbs on her dress. Grandma Margaret, thank you for my castle cake. It was the most beautiful cake ever. She threw her arms around me, and for a moment, I felt the warmth that had made all of this seem worthwhile. This little girl loved me genuinely, completely, without conditions or expectations beyond my presence in her life. But then Jessica appeared, gently extracting Emma from my arms. Come on, birthday girl. Let's get you cleaned up for more pictures. Grandma Margaret needs to start packing up the party supplies. And just like that, the moment was over, replaced by another task on my endless list. The drive home was tense. Linda complained about the park facilities, the quality of the other, children's behavior, and the temperature in the car. Marcus and Jessica discussed their evening plans. Dinner with friends, then drinks at a new rooftop bar downtown. Mom, you don't mind staying with the kids tonight, right? Marcus asked, catching my eyes in the rearview mirror. It's been so long since we've had a proper date night. I did mind. I minded that after orchestrating Emma's entire party, I was expected to provide childcare so they could go out. I minded that Linda would be sleeping in my bed while I folded out the couch. I minded that no one had asked if I was tired or thanked me for the hours I'd spent creating magic for their daughter. But I nodded, because that's what I did. That evening, as I settled the exhausted kids in front of a movie and prepared to make Linda's particular breakfast requirements for the morning, Carol found me in the kitchen. "I'm driving back to Cincinnati tomorrow," she said quietly. "But I want you to come with me." I stopped measuring coffee grounds. "What?" "Pack a bag. Come stay with me for a week. Let them figure out their own breakfast and childcare and laundry. For once." Carol's voice was gentle but firm. "You need distance to see this clearly. I can't just leave. The kids have 2 parents and a grandmother who are all perfectly capable of caring for them. You're not abandoning anyone. You're taking a break that you've earned 100 times over." I wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. The thought of sleeping in until I woke up naturally, of having conversations about something other than school schedules and grocery lists, of remembering who I was when no one needed anything. From me, it sounded like paradise. But the guilt was overwhelming. What would I tell them? The truth, that you're visiting your sister for a week. From the living room came the sounds of the kids giggling at their movie, and from upstairs, the murmur of Marcus and Jessica getting ready for their date night. Normal family sounds that I'd helped orchestrate but wasn't really part of. "Think about it," Carol said, squeezing my shoulder. "But think fast, because every day you stay in this pattern, it gets harder to imagine anything different." That night, as I lay on the fold-out couch listening to Linda snore in my bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine what it would feel like to put myself first for once. To make a decision based on what I wanted rather than what everyone else needed. The scary part wasn't imagining leaving. The scary part was realizing how much I wanted to. Carol's offer to escape to Cincinnati haunted me for 3 days. I found myself walking through my routines like a sleepwalker, mechanically preparing meals and managing schedules while my mind wandered to what it might feel like to wake up without a list of other people's needs waiting for me. On Wednesday morning, everything came to a head in the most unexpected way. I was in the basement doing laundry, the 3rd load of the day because Linda's visit had generated an extraordinary amount of dirty towels and bedding when I heard shouting from upstairs. Real shouting, not just raised voices, but the kind of argument that makes neighbors peek through their curtains. I climbed the stairs to find Marcus and Jessica in the kitchen, facing off across the breakfast island like boxers in opposite corners. Emma and Tyler were pressed against the living room doorway, wide-eyed and frightened. "Can't keep doing this, Jess. The credit cards are maxed out, we're behind on the mortgage, and you just spent $800 on that stupid networking conference! Don't you dare call it stupid! That conference got me 3 new corporate clients! Clients that won't pay you for months. We need money now, not promises." Marcus slammed his coffee mug down so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. "My mom's pension is the only steady income keeping us afloat, and you want to blow it on I. What? On keeping this family together while you sit around complaining about everything I do to try to save us?" I stepped into the kitchen, and both of them turned to me with expressions that made my blood run cold. Not embarrassment at being caught fighting, not concern for how their argument might be affecting me or the children. Instead, I saw calculation in their eyes, like I'd become the solution to their problem before I'd even understood what the problem was. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice suddenly gentle in that way that always preceded a request I couldn't refuse. "We need to talk." Jessica moved to pour me a cup of coffee, her anger from moments before transforming into something that looked like concern but felt like manipulation. "Sit down, Margaret. We have something important to discuss." I remained standing, some instinct warning me not to make myself comfortable for whatever was coming next. Marcus pulled out a folder thick with papers, bank statements, bills, legal documents I couldn't identify from a distance. "The thing is, we're in a bit of a financial bind right now. Nothing we can't handle, but we need to make some smart decisions about resources. What kind of decisions? Jessica jumped in, her voice bright with artificial enthusiasm. Well, we've been thinking about your pension situation. Right now, that money just sits in your account, and with inflation and everything, it's not really growing. But if we combined our finances more strategically, we could make that money work harder for all of us. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What exactly are you suggesting? Marcus spread the papers across the counter like a salesman laying out a deal. We want to add your name to a joint account where your pension can contribute to the household expenses more efficiently. This way, we can budget everything together: mortgage, utilities, groceries, the kids' needs. More streamlined, more fair, to everyone. Fair to everyone, I repeated slowly. Right, Jessica said, nodding eagerly. Because right now, you're living here rent-free, eating our food, using our utilities, but your pension just goes to your personal expenses. Which is fine, of course, but it doesn't really reflect how we're all sharing resources as a family. The room seemed to tilt slightly. They were reframing 3 years of unpaid domestic labor as me taking advantage of their generosity. The cooking, cleaning, childcare, grocery shopping, laundry, scheduling, transportation, none of that counted as contribution in their calculation. And there's another thing, Marcus continued, avoiding my eyes now. We've been looking at the numbers and, honestly, this house is too expensive for what we're getting out of it. There's a smaller place across town that would cut our housing costs in half. A smaller place, I said. 2 bedrooms, Jessica added quickly. Perfect for our family. More affordable, easier to maintain, closer to my commercial kitchen rental. Space. The words hung in the air like smoke. 2 bedrooms. For Marcus, Jessica, Emma, and Tyler. No room for me in their scaled-down vision of their future. Where would I live? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus and Jessica exchanged a look that confirmed my suspicions. They'd already discussed this, planned this, probably rehearsed this conversation. Well, Marcus said carefully, we've been researching some really nice senior living communities, places where you'd have your own space, activities with people, your own age, medical support if you need it. Maple Ridge Assisted Living has a great reputation, and they have availability. Assisted living. They wanted to warehouse me in an institution and take control of my pension to fund their downsized life without the inconvenience of caring for an aging parent. I don't need assisted living, I said quietly. I'm perfectly capable of living independently. Of course you are, Jessica said, her tone suggesting she thought the opposite. But independence can be scary at our age. Wouldn't it be nice to have support systems in place? Meals prepared for you, housekeeping services, a community of peers? At our age. Jessica was 34 years old. And the best part, Marcus continued, is that with your pension going toward your care there, we can all feel secure knowing you're being properly looked after. No more worrying about you being alone, no more pressure on any of us to provide care we're not really equipped to handle. I stared at my son. This man I'd raised from infancy, supported through college, helped through his early career struggles, moved across the state to assist when he needed me. He was talking about my care as if it were a burden he was eager to outsource, my pension as if it were a resource he was entitled to manage. What if I don't want to live in assisted living? The question seemed to catch them off guard. They'd expected compliance, gratitude for their thoughtful planning of my future without consulting me. Mom, Marcus said, his patience wearing thin, you have to be realistic about your situation. You can't afford to maintain your own place on just your pension. The housing market is crazy right now and you'd need help with maintenance, yard work, all that stuff. Plus, what happens if you get sick? What if you fall? What if I want to make my own decisions about my own life? Jessica's mask slipped slightly. Margaret, we're trying to help you here. We've done the research, run the numbers. Found solutions that work for everyone. Why are you being so difficult about this? Difficult. I was being difficult for not immediately agreeing to be institutionalized so they could access my income more easily. From the living room, I heard Tyler start to cry. The kind of overwhelming sob that 4-year-olds produce when the adult world becomes too frightening to understand. Emma was trying to comfort him, but her voice was shaky with her own unshed tears. "You're scaring the children," I said. "We're scaring them?" Marcus's voice rose again. "You're the one making this harder than it needs to be. We're offering you a secure future where you'll be taken care of, and you're acting like we're trying to hurt you." That's when I realized the fundamental truth I'd been avoiding for 3 years. Marcus genuinely believed he was being generous. In his mind, he'd graciously allowed me to live in his house, eat his food, and care for his children. And now he was kindly arranging for my continued care while freeing himself from the burden of my presence. He had no concept of what I'd given up, what I'd contributed, what I'd sacrificed. To him, I was a dependent who'd outlived her usefulness, not a woman who'd rebuilt her life around his needs, only to discover those needs didn't include space for me. "I need some air," I said, walking toward the back door. "Mom, we're not done talking about this," Marcus called after me. But I was done. I stepped onto the small patio behind the house and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. Carol answered on the second ring. "Maggie? What's wrong?" I tried to speak, but found I could only whisper. "They want to put me in assisted living and take my pension." "What?" I explained the conversation, the joint account proposal, the 2-bedroom house, Maple Ridge Assisted Living. Carol listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long silence. "Margaret Elizabeth Williams," she said finally, "get in your car right now and drive to Cincinnati." "I can't just leave." "You absolutely can just leave. Pack one bag, get in your car, and drive. Don't tell them where you're going. Don't ask permission. Don't explain yourself. Just go." Through the patio door, I could see Marcus and Jessica still in the kitchen, their heads bent over those papers that mapped out my future without my input. Emma had Tyler in her lap on the couch, both of them staring at the adults with the traumatized expressions children wear when their world becomes unpredictable. What about the kids? What about them? They have 2 parents who are perfectly capable of caring for them. You are not responsible for protecting them from the consequences of their parents' choices. Something in Carol's voice cut through the fog of guilt and obligation that had been clouding my judgment for 3 years. She was right. Emma and Tyler weren't my responsibility. They were my joy, my love, my heart, but not my obligation. I'd been conflating those things, allowing my love for them to trap me in a situation that was destroying me. "Pack light," Carol continued. "Just what you need for a week. Leave everything else. We'll figure out the logistics later. They'll be furious. Let them be furious. You've been absorbing their anger and disappointment and unreasonable demands for 3 years. Time to let them feel some consequences for their own actions." I looked through the door again and saw Jessica pointing at something in the folder, while Marcus nodded grimly. They were planning my life without me, making decisions about my future as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person with rights and preferences and the capacity to choose for myself. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Okay, I'll come." "Good. Drive carefully and call me when you're on the road. And Maggie? You're doing the right thing." After I hung up, I stood on that patio for another moment, looking at the small garden space where I'd tried to grow herbs last summer. Jessica had complained that the plants attracted bees and asked me to remove them before they could flower. I'd complied, of course, because keeping the peace was more important than my small attempt to create something beautiful. Now, looking at the empty patch of dirt where my basil and rosemary had briefly thrived, I understood that I'd been allowing myself to be uprooted over and over again, cutting away pieces of who I was to fit into spaces that were never designed to accommodate me. It was time to find some soil where I could actually grow. Packing that single bag was one of the most terrifying and liberating experiences of my life. I stood in the guest room, my room, though I'd never been allowed to call it that, trying to decide what pieces of my former self were worth saving. I could hear Marcus and Jessica's voices from the kitchen, no longer shouting, but engaged in intense, hushed planning. Occasionally, one of their voices would rise, "She has to understand," or "We can't keep," followed by urgent shushing. They were strategizing how to handle my resistance to their assisted living plan, never imagining that I might have plans of my own. I pulled my old suitcase from the closet, the same one George and I had used for our anniversary trips to Mackinac Island. It smelled faintly of lavender sachets I'd packed years ago, back when I had time for small luxuries like scented drawer liners and weekend getaways. What do you pack when you're escaping your own life? I folded my 3 best outfits, the clothes. That made me feel like Margaret instead of just Mom. I packed my medications, my reading glasses, the small jewelry box that held my wedding ring, and the pearl earrings George had given me for our 25th anniversary. I grabbed my phone charger, my book of crossword puzzles, and the framed photo of George and me from our cruise to Alaska, the last vacation we'd taken before he got sick. At the bottom of the bag, I tucked away something I hadn't looked at in months. My old address book, filled with the phone numbers of friends I'd lost touch with when I moved in here. Women from my book club, my former neighbors, colleagues from my accounting days. People who'd known me as a person, not just as someone's helper. The hardest part was deciding what to do about Emma and Tyler. They were still on the couch, Emma reading Tyler a picture book in the gentle, motherly way that 7-year-olds sometimes adopt with younger siblings. Tyler had stopped crying, but his face was still blotchy and confused. I couldn't leave without saying goodbye, but I also couldn't explain where I was going without creating more trauma for them. So I knelt down beside the couch and hugged them both. "I have to go visit Aunt Carol for a little while," I said simply. "When will you be back?" Emma asked, looking up from the book. The question pierced my heart because I honestly didn't know. Maybe a week, maybe longer, maybe never. But I couldn't tell that to a 7-year-old who'd already heard too much adult conflict for one morning. "I'm not sure yet, sweetheart. But I want you to know that I love you both very much, and that will never change no matter where I am." Tyler wrapped his arms around my neck with the fierce, desperate hug that small children give when they sense something important is happening. "Don't go, Grandma Margaret. I'll be good, I promise." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. In Tyler's 4-year-old mind, adult departures were connected to his behavior. If Grandma was leaving, it must be because he'd done something wrong. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, holding him tight. "You are the best little boy in the whole world. This has nothing to do with you being good or bad. Sometimes grown-ups just need to take care of important things, and that's what I'm doing." Emma studied my face with those 2 wise eyes. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" "We're just having a disagreement about some grown-up things. Nothing for you to worry about." But Emma was 7, old enough to understand when adults were lying to protect her feelings. She nodded solemnly and squeezed my hand. "Will you call us?" "Of course I will." I kissed them both, inhaling their little kid smell of shampoo and graham crackers, trying to memorize the weight of their arms around me. Then I stood up, picked up my suitcase, and walked toward the front door before I could lose my nerve. Marcus appeared in the hallway just as I reached for the doorknob. "Where are you going with that suitcase?" His tone was sharp, suspicious, like he was catching me in some kind of criminal act. For 3 years, I'd asked permission for everything, to go to the grocery store, to visit the library, to take the kids to the park. The idea that I might go somewhere without checking with him first clearly hadn't occurred to him. "I'm going to visit Carol for a few days." Now? In the middle of our conversation? "Mom, we need to finish discussing your future. This is important." My Future is exactly what I need to think about. That's why I'm leaving. Jessica emerged from the kitchen, her expression a mixture of panic and irritation. Margaret, running away isn't going to solve anything. We're trying to help you make responsible decisions about your care, running away. As if I were a teenager sneaking out to meet friends, not a 71-year-old woman choosing to leave a situation where I was being manipulated and controlled. I'm not running away. I'm visiting my sister. There's a difference. Marcus stepped closer, and for the first time in our relationship, I felt intimidated by my own son. He was 6 inches taller than me and 40 pounds heavier, and there was something in his posture that reminded me of his father during the worst days of our marriage. That sense of masculine authority being challenged and responding with barely contained aggression. You can't just leave when we're trying to work out arrangements for everyone's benefit. That's not how families handle problems. I'm not a problem to be handled, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I'm a person with the right to make my own choices about my own life. Not when those choices affect the whole family. Jessica's voice was rising again. We've planned everything around having you here, and now you want to just disappear because you don't like the solutions we've come up with? The irony was breathtaking. They'd planned my institutionalization around their convenience, but me taking a week to think about it was selfish disruption of family harmony. If you leave now, Marcus said, his voice dropping to the quiet threat level that had always made me cave in the past. Don't expect us to hold your spot. We'll move forward with our plans, and you might not have the same options when you decide to come back. What options? I asked. The option to live in the guest room while you control my finances and ship me off to assisted living when it becomes convenient. Those options. Marcus's face flushed red. We're trying to take care of you. No, I said, finally understanding the difference. You're trying to manage me. There's a difference. I opened the front door, and the September air hit my face like a blessing. For the first time in 3 years, I was walking out of this house without a list of errands to run or tasks to complete. I was leaving because I wanted to leave, going where I wanted to go, making a choice that was entirely my own. If you walk out, that door, Marcus called after me, don't come crawling back when you realize you can't afford to live on your own. I turned back to look at him one last time. This man I'd given birth to, raised, sacrificed for, enabled, and ultimately failed by loving him more than I loved myself. Marcus, I said quietly, I raised you better than this. Then I closed the door behind me and walked to my car. The drive to Cincinnati took 4 hours, but it felt like traveling through time as well as space. With every mile that passed, I felt layers of obligation and guilt peeling away like old paint. By the time I reached the Ohio state line, I was crying. Not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt like coming back to life. I called Carol when I stopped for gas outside Columbus. I did it, I said. I'm almost there. How are you feeling? I thought about that as I watched other travelers pumping gas and buying snacks, living their ordinary lives with a freedom I'd forgotten existed. Scared, I said honestly. But also, I can't remember the last time I made a decision just because I wanted to. That's going to feel strange for a while, Carol said gently. You've been living other people's lives for so long, you've forgotten what your own preferences feel like. She was right. As I got back in the car and continued toward Cincinnati, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd chosen what to have for dinner based on what I wanted to eat, or picked a TV show because it interested me, or spent a Saturday morning in bed just because I felt like it. For 3 years, every choice had been filtered through other people's needs and expectations. What would make Marcus happy? What would keep Jessica from being stressed? What did the kids need? What would maintain family harmony? Now, driving toward my sister's house with the windows down and the radio playing songs I actually liked, I was rediscovering the simple pleasure of making choices for myself. My phone buzzed with text messages I didn't answer. Marcus trying to guilt me into coming back. Jessica alternating between anger and fake concern. Even a message from little Emma that someone had clearly helped her compose. "Grandma Margaret, please come home, we miss you." But I kept driving, because for the first time in years, I was going towards something I wanted instead of away from something I feared. When I pulled into Carol's driveway, she was waiting on the front porch with 2 glasses of wine and the biggest smile I'd seen in months. "Welcome back to yourself, Maggie," she said as she hugged me. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was actually home. The first morning I woke up in Carol's guest bedroom, I lay still for 10 minutes waiting for the familiar anxiety of my daily to-do list to kick in, but nothing came. No mental inventory of breakfast preferences, no schedule of pickups and drop-offs, no urgent tasks that had to be completed before everyone else's day could begin smoothly. Just silence and sunlight streaming through curtains I hadn't chosen, in a room where no one expected anything from me. Carol was already up, humming in the kitchen. I found her making coffee in an actual coffee press, not the industrial strength machine that produced caffeine for a household of 6, but a small, elegant glass contraption that made coffee for the pure pleasure of drinking it. "How'd you sleep?" she asked, pouring me a mug without asking how I liked it, because she remembered from our old Saturday morning talks that I preferred it black, with just a touch of sugar. "I slept for 10 hours, I said, amazed. "I can't remember the last time I slept that long. Your body probably needed it. You've been running on adrenaline and obligation for 3 years. We sat on her back porch, watching her neighbor's cat stalk something in the garden. Carol's house was smaller than the one I'd shared with Marcus and Jessica, but it felt spacious in ways that had nothing to do with square footage. There was room to breathe here, room to think, room to exist without purpose or productivity. "So," Carol said after we'd sat in comfortable silence for a while, "what do you want to do today?" The question stumped me completely. What did I want to do? For 3 years, my days had been dictated by other people's needs and schedules. The concept of having wants, of making choices based on preference rather than obligation, felt foreign. "I honestly don't know," I admitted. Carol smiled. "That's okay. We'll start small. Are you hungry?" I realized. Actually hungry, not just mechanically eating while preparing food for others or grabbing whatever was quick between tasks. My stomach was reminding me that I had physical needs and desires. Yes. "What sounds good to you?" Another stumping question. At Marcus and Jessica's house, breakfast was whatever would be easiest for the kids, quickest to prepare, and most economical. My preferences had never entered the equation. I used to love blueberry pancakes," I said tentatively, like I was confessing to a guilty pleasure. Then blueberry pancakes it is. We spent the morning cooking together, not because anyone expected a meal to be ready at a specific time, but because we wanted to. Carol let me mix the batter while she told me about her book club's latest selection, and I found myself actually listening instead of mentally organizing someone else's day while pretending to pay attention. The pancakes were perfect, fluffy, and sweet, with berries that burst on my tongue like tiny celebrations. I ate 3 of them slowly, savoring each bite instead of wolfing down food while simultaneously packing lunches and wiping faces and answering questions about lost homework. "These are incredible," I said. "They're just pancakes, Maggie." "No," I said, understanding something important. "They're the first meal I've eaten in 3 years that was made just because I wanted it." That afternoon, Carol suggested we go shopping. Not grocery shopping with a carefully planned list and coupon strategy, but the kind of wandering, purposeless browsing that I'd forgotten existed. "I need some fall clothes," she said. "Want to come try things on and tell me what looks ridiculous? The department store?" Something magical happened. Carol handed me a sweater, a beautiful burgundy cardigan with tiny pearl buttons, and said, "This would look gorgeous on you. Try it on." I almost said no automatically, the way I'd trained myself to decline anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. But then I caught sight of myself in the dressing room mirror and realized I looked terrible. My clothes were all practical, comfortable, and completely unflattering. I'd been dressing like someone who didn't matter, someone who shouldn't take up space or draw attention. The burgundy sweater transformed me. It brought out the color in my cheeks, made my gray hair look silver instead of dull, reminded me that I had a shape under all those loose, forgettable outfits. "Buy it," Carol said when I emerged from the dressing room. "It's $80. That's ridiculous for a sweater." "Margaret Elizabeth Williams, when was the last time you spent $80 on yourself?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. "Buy the sweater." So I did, and then I bought a pair of well-fitted jeans and a scarf that served no purpose except to be beautiful. Walking out of that store with shopping bags full of things I'd chosen simply because I liked them felt like a revolutionary act. That evening, Carol's friend Helen came over for dinner. Helen was a retired teacher, about my age, with short silver hair and laugh lines that suggested she'd spent her retirement actually enjoying herself. Over wine and pasta, she told stories about her recent trip to Tuscany, her pottery classes, her volunteer work at the animal shelter. "What about you, Margaret?" Helen asked. "What are you passionate about these days?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Passionate about. I'd been so focused on everyone else's passions, Marcus's career, Jessica's business, Emma's school projects, Tyler's developmental milestones, that I'd forgotten I was allowed to have my own. I'm not sure anymore," I said, honestly. Helen's expression softened with understanding. "That happens sometimes. Life gets in the way of living, if you know what I mean. But the passions are still there, just buried under other people's expectations. How do you find them again?" You start paying attention to what makes you curious, what makes you lose track of time, what you think about when your mind wanders. Helen leaned forward. "For instance, what did you love doing before you became everyone else's solution to their problems?" I thought about it. Before Marcus, before the grandkids, before I became a full-time family manager, what had made me happy? "I used to love reading," I said slowly. "Not just novels, but history books, biographies. I was fascinated by how people lived in different eras." "When did you stop?" "I guess, gradually. There was always something more urgent to do, someone who needed help with something. Reading felt selfish when there were dishes to wash or homework to supervise." Carol snorted. "Reading is selfish? Margaret, reading is food for your soul." Of course it felt selfish. You've been starving yourself spiritually for 3 years. The next morning, Carol and I went to the library. Not to pick up books for children or research school projects, but to browse the stacks like I used to do. On Saturday afternoons before my life became consumed by other people's schedules. I found myself in the history section, running my fingers along the spines of books about Victorian England, the American West, ancient civilizations. I pulled out a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt and felt a familiar thrill of curiosity that I'd almost forgotten existed. "Find something good?" Carol asked. I'd forgotten how much I loved learning about strong women who changed the world against all odds. Sounds like you could use some inspiration in that department. I checked out 3 books, and we spent the afternoon on Carol's porch swing, reading in comfortable silence. For the first time in years, I lost track of time because I was doing something I enjoyed, not because I was overwhelmed by obligations. My phone buzzed with messages throughout the day. Marcus alternating between anger and guilt tactics, Jessica sending passive-aggressive updates about how difficult the kids were being without me. I read them, felt the familiar tug of responsibility and guilt, and then put the phone aside and returned to Eleanor Roosevelt's story. If she could stand up to presidents and transform society while dealing with a difficult husband and demanding in-laws, maybe I could figure out how to reclaim my own life. That evening, Carol and I cooked dinner together. Not because anyone expected it, but because we wanted to spend time together and we both enjoyed the ritual of preparing food. We opened a bottle of wine, put on music, and made a mess of the kitchen while creating something delicious. "You know what I'm noticing?" Carol said as we sat down to eat. "What?" "You're laughing again. Really laughing, not just polite chuckling or nervous giggling. You're remembering how to be joyful." She was right. For 3 days, I'd been rediscovering parts of myself I'd thought were gone forever. The woman who enjoyed good books and interesting conversations. The woman who took pleasure in beautiful things and wasn't afraid to want them. The woman who had opinions and preferences and the right to express them. "I feel like I'm waking up from a very long, very boring dream," I said. "More like a nightmare where you convinced yourself you were the supporting character in everyone else's story." That night I called Emma and Tyler. Marcus answered and was coldly polite, handing the phone to the kids without speaking to me directly. Emma told me about school and her friend's birthday party, and Tyler babbled about a new toy truck he'd gotten. They both asked when I was coming home, and I gave them the same answer I'd been giving myself. "Soon, sweethearts. Grandma just needs to take care of some things first." But as I hung up the phone, I realized something had shifted. I still loved them desperately, still missed their hugs and their little voices calling my name. But the panic was gone. The frantic urgency that had made me believe their well-being depended entirely on my presence and sacrifice. They were okay. They had parents, they had each other, they had the resilience that children possess in abundance. My love for them didn't require me to disappear as a person. "How are you feeling about going back?" Carol asked later as we cleaned up the kitchen. I paused, dish towel in hand, considering the question seriously. "I don't know if I am going back," I said. "At least not the way I was before." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time I remembered that I'm not just Marcus's mother or Emma and Tyler's grandmother. I'm Margaret Williams, and I have a life to live that belongs to me." For the first time in 3 years, that felt like a possibility instead of a fantasy. On Friday morning of my first week at Carol's, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Not the gentle buzz of a text message, but the insistent shrieking of an actual phone call that jerked me out of the deepest sleep I'd had in years. The caller ID showed Marcus's number, and my first instinct was the familiar spike of panic. Someone must be hurt. There must be an emergency. Why else would he call so early? 3 years of being the family's first responder had trained me to assume crisis at every unexpected contact. "Hello?" I answered, my heart already racing. "Mom, thank God you picked up." Marcus's voice was strained, exhausted. "I need you to come home right now. Jessica's in the hospital." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Whatever was happening between us, Jessica was still the mother of my grandchildren, still someone I cared about despite everything. What happened? Is she okay? "She collapsed at a catering event last night. They think it's stress-related. Maybe. Her blood pressure. She's stable now, but they're keeping her for observation." Marcus's voice cracked. "Mom, I can't handle this alone. The kids are scared. I don't know Jessica's schedule. I have 3 client meetings I can't cancel, and Tyler won't stop crying for you." The familiar weight of responsibility settled back onto my shoulders like a lead blanket. This was exactly the kind of crisis that had kept me trapped for 3 years. Real emergencies that required real help, needs that felt too urgent to question or negotiate. "I'll be there in 4 hours, I heard myself say. "Thank you. I knew you wouldn't abandon us when we really needed you." After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed in Carol's guest room, feeling the peace and clarity of the past week draining, away like water from a broken dam. Within minutes, I was mentally cataloging everything that would need to be handled, picking up the kids from school, finding out what Jessica had planned for her weekend events, managing Marcus's emotional crisis while keeping Emma and Tyler calm. I was halfway to the closet to start packing when Carol appeared in the doorway. I heard the phone. "Everything okay?" I explained about Jessica's hospitalization, Marcus's panic, Tyler's tears. Carol listened without interrupting, but I could see something shifting in her expression as I talked. "So, you're going back," she said when I finished. "I have to. Jessica's in the hospital, and Marcus can't." "Marcus can't what? Handle his own children? Manage his own household? Figure out his wife's schedule?" "Carol, this is different. This is a real emergency. Maggie, sit down." Carol's voice was gentle but firm. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." She pulled out her phone and showed me Facebook. Jessica's catering business page had a post from the previous evening. "Successfully catered the Morrison Corp annual dinner for 150 guests. Another amazing event in the books. Thanks to everyone who made tonight special." The post was time-stamped at 11:30 p.m., with photos of Jessica smiling beside an elaborate dessert display. If she collapsed from stress, it happened after she finished the event and had time to post about it on social media, Carol said quietly. I stared at the photos. Jessica looked tired but triumphant, not like someone on the verge of a medical emergency. She was even wearing the diamond earrings I'd given her for Christmas, not exactly the accessories of someone too stressed to function. Maybe she collapsed after she got home, I said, but doubt was creeping in. Carol scrolled to Marcus's Facebook page. His most recent post from 2 hours ago showed a photo of him at the hospital cafeteria with a coffee and sandwich. The caption read, "Long night. At the hospital, but family comes first. Grateful for the people who show up when it matters." "Does that look like a man in crisis to you?" Carol asked. It didn't. Marcus looked tired but composed, even a little pleased with himself for handling the situation so responsibly. Nothing. Like the panicked, overwhelmed person who'd called me. "I think," Carol said carefully, "this might be a test." "A test?" "You've been gone for a week. You haven't responded to their guilt trips or manipulation tactics. So now they need to create a situation that will make you feel like you have no choice but to come running back." The possibility hit me like a slap. Was Jessica's hospitalization even real? Or was it exaggerated, dramatized, turned into an emergency to pull me back into their orbit just when I was starting to find my own footing? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Kids asking for you constantly. Tyler threw up from crying so hard. Please hurry." Then another. "Emma refuses to go to school without knowing you're coming home. This is killing them." And another. "Mom, I'm falling apart here. I know we had our disagreement, but this is bigger than that. We need you." I showed the messages to Carol, who read them with increasing disgust. "Classic manipulation," she said. "Create urgency. Invoke the children's suffering. Make you feel guilty for having boundaries, then position himself as the reasonable one who's willing to overlook your selfishness because of the crisis." But what if Tyler really is upset? What if Emma is scared? Then their father needs to comfort them and explain what's happening in age-appropriate ways. That's called parenting, Maggie. It's not your job. I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew Carol was right. In 3 years of living with Marcus and Jessica, I'd never seen either of them handle a genuine crisis. Every problem, no matter how small, had been deflected to me. Sick kids, scheduling conflicts, household emergencies, emotional meltdowns. I'd been their solution to everything, which meant they'd never had to develop their own coping skills. "What if I don't go back?" I asked. "What if you don't? I mean, what if Jessica really is in the hospital and I'm not there to help?" Then Marcus. We'll figure it out. He'll call his friends, hire a babysitter, ask his neighbors for help, or, God forbid, actually parent his own children through a difficult situation. Carol sat down beside me on the bed. "Maggie, for 3 years you've been so afraid of what would happen if you weren't there to fix everything that you never gave them the chance to become competent adults. You've been enabling their helplessness." The truth of that statement was uncomfortable, but undeniable. How many times had I stepped in to handle problems before Marcus or Jessica had even tried to solve them? How many times had I done things For them that they were perfectly capable of doing themselves, just because it was easier than watching them struggle. But the kids will be fine. They might be confused and upset for a few days, but they'll adjust. Children are incredibly resilient when the adults in their lives are honest with them and give them age-appropriate ways to cope. My phone rang again. Marcus, of course. Did you leave yet? The doctor wants to discharge Jessica this afternoon, but she needs someone to drive her home and help her get settled. Plus, Emma has that science project due Monday, and I have no idea how to help her with it. Jessica being discharged this afternoon, after a one-night hospital stay for stress-related symptoms that may or may not have been serious. And immediately, the focus was shifting to what I could do to make everyone else's life easier. Marcus, I said slowly, how serious is Jessica's condition? Well, her blood pressure was elevated and she was dehydrated. The doctor said she needs rest and less stress. But she's not in any danger? No, not danger exactly, but... And you're capable of driving her home from the hospital? Yes, but Mom, that's not the point. She's going to need help for the next few days, and I can't take time off work right now. We've got bills to pay, especially with the medical expenses. There it was. Jessica wasn't in serious medical danger. Marcus was perfectly capable of handling the immediate crisis, but they wanted me to return to my role as unpaid caregiver, so their lives could continue without disruption. I'm going to stay here a few more days, I said. Silence. Then, you're what? I'm staying with Carol through the weekend. Jessica needs rest, which means she needs quiet. Having me there rushing around, taking care of everyone else, isn't going to help her recover. Mom, that's ridiculous. We need your help right now. You need to figure out how to help yourselves. Marcus's voice shifted to that cold, angry tone I'd learned to fear. Fine, but don't expect us to keep begging you to be part of this family. We'll manage without you, and maybe we'll realize we're better off that way. The threat was designed to make me panic, to send me rushing back with apologies and promises to be more accommodating. For 3 years, it had worked perfectly, but this time, something had changed. Maybe you will, I said calmly. Maybe figuring out how to manage without me is exactly what this family needs. I hung up the phone and turned to Carol, who was watching me with pride and concern. How do you feel? She asked. Terrified, I admitted, and also free. That afternoon, I called the hospital directly and asked to speak with Jessica. When she came to the phone, her voice was weak and theatrical. Margaret? Oh, thank goodness. Marcus said you were coming home to help. I feel so awful, and the doctors are saying I need to eliminate stress from my life. I'm glad you're feeling better, I said. I wanted to check on you myself. When will you be here? I'm being discharged in a few hours, and I really need... Jessica, I'm going to stay with my sister through the weekend. You need rest, and having me there managing everyone else's needs won't help you recover. Silence. Then, in a much stronger voice, Are you serious right now? I'm in the hospital, and you're choosing your vacation over your family? I'm choosing to let your family learn how to take care of itself. This is unbelievable. After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. Jessica, what exactly have you done for me? Another silence, longer this time. We've given you a home, included you in our family. You've given me a job. Cooking, cleaning, childcare, transportation, household management. The only difference between me and paid help is that you don't pay me. That's not fair. You know we appreciate. When was the last time you asked how I was feeling? When did you last thank me for anything? When have you ever considered what I might want or need? Jessica's voice turned cold. If that's how you really feel, then maybe it's better if you don't come back at all. Maybe it is, I said, and hung up. I sat there holding the phone, shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. For the first time in 3 years, I'd spoken my truth without apologizing, without softening it to protect someone else's feelings, without immediately taking it back to preserve family harmony. Carol squeezed my shoulder. "How does it feel to tell the truth?" "Like jumping off a cliff," I said. "Terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. That's what courage feels like." That evening, Carol opened a bottle of champagne. "What are we celebrating?" I asked. "The death of doormat Margaret, and the resurrection of the woman who knows her own worth." We clinked glasses on her back porch as the sun set over Cincinnati, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. 3 months later, I was watering the herbs on my apartment balcony when my phone rang. The caller, ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something about it seemed familiar. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Hello? Grandma Margaret?" Emma's small voice was cautious, almost whispered. My heart stopped. "Emma? Sweetheart, how did you get this number?" "I found it in Daddy's phone." "Grandma Margaret, are you ever coming back?" The question I'd been dreading for months, delivered in the innocent, direct way that only children possess. I sat down heavily in my small patio chair, looking out at the Cincinnati skyline that had become my new horizon. "I don't know, sweetheart. How are you doing? How's Tyler?" "Tyler's okay. He has a new babysitter named Mrs. Chen. She's nice, but she doesn't make pancakes like you do, and she doesn't know the monster voice for bedtime stories." Each word was a tiny knife in my chest. I'd spent 3 months building a life where I mattered, where my choices were my own, where I wasn't defined by other people's needs. But Emma's voice reminded me that some connections transcend self-preservation. "Are you taking care of yourself?" I asked, the grandmother, in me unable to stop worrying about her well-being. "I guess. Daddy's been home more. He learned how to braid my hair, but it's not as good as yours. And Mommy's been nicer since she came home from the hospital." Hospital. The word hung in the air between us, loaded with everything that had happened. And everything that hadn't been said. "Emma, I need you to know something very important. I love you and Tyler more than all the stars in the sky. That will never, ever change, no matter where I live or what happens between the grown-ups." "Then why did you leave us?" The question every grandparent fears, delivered with the devastating simplicity of a 7-year-old who just wants her world to make sense. Sometimes grown-ups need to take care of themselves so they can be better at taking care of the people they love. I wasn't doing a very good job of taking care of myself when I lived with you. "Were you sad?" Out of the mouths of babes. "Yes, sweetheart. I was very sad." "Are you happier now?" I looked around my small 1-bedroom apartment, the first place I'd lived alone since George died. The walls were painted a soft yellow I'd chosen. Myself. The bookshelves were full of history and biography books I was reading for pure pleasure. The kitchen table had only 2 chairs, but they were comfortable ones where Carol and I had shared countless cups of coffee and honest conversations. "Yes," I said honestly. "I am happier now." "Good," Emma said with the matter-of-fact acceptance of childhood. "Daddy says you needed space to think about things, but I wanted to make sure you knew we still love you." "I know, sweetheart. I love you too." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time, watching the late afternoon light fade over the city. 3 months ago, that phone call would have sent me running back. Guilt and love tangled up so tightly I couldn't tell the difference between them. But something had shifted during my time away. I still loved Emma and Tyler desperately, but I'd learned that love didn't require me to disappear as a person. In fact, the opposite was true. I was better able to love them when I wasn't drowning in resentment and exhaustion from trying to be everything to everyone. That evening, Carol came over for dinner, a weekly tradition we'd established. She found Me on the balcony, still thinking about Emma's call. "You okay?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. I told her about the conversation, and Carol listened with the patience she'd shown me during all the difficult days of rebuilding my life. "What are you thinking?" she asked when I finished. "I'm thinking that I want to see them. Not to go back to being their unpaid domestic worker, but to be their grandmother. To have a relationship with them that doesn't require me to sacrifice my own well-being." Think that's possible? I'd been wondering the same thing for weeks. I don't know, but I think I'm ready to find out. The next morning, I called Marcus. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice cautious. "Mom." "Hello, Marcus. Emma called me yesterday." A pause. "I told her not to bother you. I'm sorry if—" She didn't bother me. I was glad to hear from her. I took a deep breath. "I'd like to see the kids, not to discuss our situation or negotiate. Anything. Just to spend time with Emma and Tyler." Okay, when?" "This Saturday. I could take them to lunch and the Children's Museum, bring them back by dinner time." Another pause, longer this time. "Just the kids?" "Just the kids. Mom, we need to talk eventually about everything that happened." "Maybe we do. But not yet. Right now, I just want to be their grandmother without all the other complications." Saturday morning, I drove to my old neighborhood with butterflies in my stomach. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. The burgundy sweater I'd bought with Carol, well-fitted jeans, the pearl earrings George had given me. I looked like a woman who valued herself, not someone who'd forgotten she deserved to take up space in the world. Marcus met me at the front door, and we both maintained careful politeness. As Emma and Tyler came running, Tyler launched himself into my arms with the wholehearted enthusiasm of a 4-year-old who'd missed his favorite person. "Grandma Margaret, are you coming home now?" "I'm coming to spend the day with you," I said, hugging him tight and breathing in his little boy smell of shampoo and playground dirt. "We're going to have an adventure." Emma hung back slightly, old enough to sense the undercurrents of adult complication, but young enough to want things to be simple. "Just for today?" she asked. "Today is perfect," I said. "We don't need to worry about anything except having fun together." The Children's Museum was exactly what we all needed, a place where the only agenda was curiosity and discovery. Tyler spent an hour in the water play area, soaking himself and giggling as he directed streams of water through tubes and wheels. Emma gravitated toward the history exhibit, asking questions about Victorian clothing and pioneer families. At lunch, Tyler chattered about his preschool friends and his new favorite truck, while Emma told me about her reading level and her plans for her upcoming 8th birthday. Normal grandmother-grandchild conversation, unweighted by household logistics or behavioral management. "Grandma Margaret," Emma said as we shared a piece of chocolate cake, "are you going to come to my birthday party?" The question I'd been avoiding for 3 months. Emma's birthday was in 2 weeks, the first family celebration since I'd left. "Would you like me to be there?" "Yes, but—" She hesitated, 7-year-old wisdom trying to navigate adult complexities. "Will you and Daddy be okay together? Your daddy and I are working on figuring some things out. But your birthday is about you, not about grown-up problems. If you want me there, I'd love to come." When I brought them home that evening, Marcus was waiting on the front porch. The kids ran inside to tell Jessica about our adventures, leaving us alone for the first conversation we'd had since my escape to Carol's. "They missed you," he said quietly. "I missed them too. Mom, I think I owe you an apology." I studied his face, looking for sincerity or manipulation. What I saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine regret. For what, specifically? For taking you for granted. For assuming your help was owed instead of given. For treating you like you existed to solve our problems instead of— He paused, struggling with words. "Instead of remembering that you're a person with your own life and needs." It wasn't a complete apology. It didn't address the financial manipulation or the assisted living ultimatum, but it was more self-awareness than Marcus had shown in years. Thank you for saying that. Jessica's been different since you left. More, I don't know, present with the kids, like she had to step up when you weren't there to handle everything. And you? I learned how to braid Emma's hair, he said with a small smile. And I can make pancakes now, though they're not as good as yours. We stood there in the gathering dusk, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. The possibility of rebuilding a relationship that didn't require me to disappear. I'm not coming back, I said gently. Not to live here, not to be your solution to every problem, but I want to be part of Emma and Tyler's lives in a way that works for everyone. Marcus nodded slowly. What would that look like? Saturday visits, birthday parties, phone calls when they want to talk to their grandmother. A relationship that's about love, not logistics. I think that sounds good. 2 weeks later, I attended Emma's birthday party. Not as the event coordinator or cleanup crew, but as a guest who brought a thoughtfully chosen present and enjoyed watching her granddaughter blow out candles. On a store-bought cake that was perfectly adequate, Jessica and I were cordial but distant. She'd lost weight and seemed more engaged with the children, though she was still cool toward me. That was fine. I didn't need her friendship, just her acceptance of my place in Emma and Tyler's lives. That evening, as I drove back to my apartment, I reflected on how different this birthday party had been from the elaborate castle cake celebration that had helped precipitate my awakening. Emma had been just as happy with a simple party, just as delighted with attention from the adults who mattered to her. I'd spent years believing that my worth was measured by how much I could do for others, how many problems I could solve, how seamlessly I could make everyone else's life easier. But watching Emma open presents surrounded by people who loved her just for being herself, I understood that the most valuable gift I could give my grandchildren wasn't my endless service. It was the example of a woman who knew her own worth. 6. Months later, Carol and I took a trip to Ireland, something we'd talked about for years, but never done. I sent Emma and Tyler postcards from Dublin and Cork, pictures of green countryside and ancient castles. When I returned, Tyler had started kindergarten, and Emma had lost her first tooth. Life had continued without me managing every detail, and everyone had survived just fine. My relationship with Marcus slowly improved as we learned to interact as adults rather than as a parent and a child who'd never fully grown up. He started asking about my life, my interests, my plans. I started seeing him as a person separate from his role as my son. The financial situation resolved itself in an unexpected way. Marcus got a significant promotion, Jessica's catering business flourished, and they never mentioned my pension again. Whether this was because they no longer needed the money or because they'd finally understood that it wasn't theirs to claim, I didn't know and didn't ask. What mattered was that I'd reclaimed my right to self-determination and discovered that the world didn't end when I stopped trying to be everyone's everything. On the first anniversary of my escape to Carol's house, I threw myself a party. Not a birthday or holiday celebration, but a rebirth party, acknowledging the day I'd chosen myself over everyone else's expectations. Carol raised her glass in a toast. To Margaret Williams, who remembered that you can't pour from an empty cup. To second chances, I replied, and the courage to take them. As I looked around my small apartment filled with friends who valued me for who I was rather than what I could do for them, I realized I'd finally learned the most important lesson of my life. Love that requires you to disappear isn't love at all. It's just need wearing love's disguise. And I was done being anyone's need. I was ready to be someone's joy, starting with my own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.